Moved by Councillor Arola, seconded by Councillor Hudson. Resolved that the regular meeting commence at the hour of 7 p.m. And be further resolved that Council acknowledge that we are meeting in the Robinson Superior Treaty Area on lands that have been traditionally used by these several Indigenous nations. But we would like to pay special recognition to our closest Indigenous neighbours, the communities of Victogon, Anishinaabe, and Pic-Mobert First Nations. We wish to recognize the long history of the First Nations and Métis people in our region, specifically, and show respect to them today. All in favor? I'd like to call the meeting to order. Are there any additions or deletions to the agenda? Seeing none. Are there any disclosures of pecuniary interest and general nature thereof?
Declaration of pecuniary interest. Member of Council Mike Scapanello. Council meeting date March 27th, 2019 in open session. I declare a pecuniary interest on agenda item number 1501.
Moved by Councillor Arola, seconded by Councillor Hudson. Resolved that the agenda be approved and circulated. All in favor? Moved by Councillor Hudson, seconded by Councillor Scapanello. Resolved that the presentation provided by Stephanie Ash, President and CEO of Fire Dog Communications, Inc., regarding the aquaculture feasibility study final report be accepted and received. Indeed, we'll read the rest of
it. Good evening, Your Worship and members of Council. Thank you for inviting me to be here tonight to present the final report of the aquaculture feasibility study. I have some slides to go through and then open for questions after the presentation. So just an overview of the project. We were hired in February of this year to undertake a feasibility study for the township. This is really a first phase project looking at some research and analysis into the potential of an aquaculture industry for Manitouwadge. And the purpose of this study was really to set the framework to look at what would the opportunities potentially be for Manitouwadge, and then to be able to make recommendations related to further plans that could be prepared for the most feasible options. Our firm at Fire Dog Communications partnered with TBT Engineering in Thunder Bay to deliver this project. They have an environmental division with a really great team of biologists who specialize in fish, and so they were a really great partner for this project specifically. So again, just looking at what the objectives of the study were, we wanted to identify and evaluate the most feasible opportunities, if any, for aquaculture development in Manitouwadge. And when I say if any, we really took a look at let's not just make a report with some high-level recommendations for the sake of a report. Let's actually make some real recommendations and let the community know if we really feel as professionals that there aren't any opportunities in aquaculture for Manitouwadge. And we also looked at 3 broad issues in this report. So the potential local appetite for an aquaculture industry. That means, does the community even have interest in pursuing this type of industry? What are the local assets that exist currently that could be leveraged to develop this type of business opportunity? As well as looking at the market itself. So is there a market locally but also regionally and provincially to be able to make this a successful business venture and provide some detail that would actually hopefully inspire entrepreneurship and business development among the business community here in Manitouwadge. So our process was quite a quick one for this project. So we started in February, and that was phase 1 with reviewing all of the existing community plans in Manitouwadge. You fortunately have some great recent plans that have been done. So we looked at your community asset plans as well as your community strategic plans and market research plans and all kinds of great business plans that you were able to provide us with. As well as we conducted our own research of this sector and looked at market trends globally across Canada, as well as in Ontario and in Northern Ontario as well. We visited the community at the beginning of March, where we held an information session and invited the community to come and learn more about a potential aquaculture industry. During that evening, we did also have surveys for distribution, as well as we had an online survey that people could fill out if they weren't able to attend one of the information sessions. The third phase was some market research. We actually did some research regionally among restaurant owners, grocery store owners, farmers markets, asking them where the demand was in terms of fresh fish products and where they were sourcing their fish from currently, where there was gaps, where there were needs, and where they would potentially look to source, what type of fish products they would potentially look to source from a community like Manitouwadge. We also looked at other peer industries in other jurisdictions who were pursuing aquaculture and looked at their challenges as well as things that are working well for them. So a lot of phone calls and a lot of online, so qualitative as well as quantitative data collection for market research. And then we provided a draft study for input for an internal review. And then finally here today to present the final report to Council and launch the survey and the report publicly. And I know that's already been done. So what is aquaculture? And it was interesting when we came to our open house that there was some confusion among community residents around what aquaculture actually is. And so we were really happy to be able to clarify that it's not a harvesting and stocking program that we were actually looking into. We're actually looking into farming. So fish farming for commercial benefit. And so if you look at what the definitions of aquaculture are, it is cultivating freshwater or saltwater populations in controlled conditions that are specifically for commercial benefit as opposed to for stocking natural fish populations. And so we look at this from a perspective of it can be done in tanks and fish ponds in artificial environments, and on coastal communities you'll find this happening also in ocean enclosures as well as in lake enclosures as well. So one of the important things I think many of us don't realize is that aquaculture is actually the fastest growing food production sector in the world. And I think it's really important to consider that when we look at future planning for communities and municipalities, not just from where we get our food sources from, but also business and economic opportunities. And currently, aquaculture is providing approximately 50% of the fish we eat today. I think that was quite surprising for people who came to the open house. They didn't realize the impact that fish farming was already having on how we source our food. So if we look globally, this is a growing industry. There's increasing demand worldwide for sustainably sourced seafood. And this market is expected to continue to accelerate very quickly over the next 5 years. Has a predicted annual growth rate of just under 5% until 2022. You'll see if you look at global data, communities are scrambling to see how they can develop aquaculture businesses quickly and make sure that they're really heavily involved in this really fast-growing sector. And so why is this sector growing so quickly? There's been a global shift towards farmed seafood because of several key market drivers. So, of course, we have an insufficient supply of seafood. We know that our global population is growing exponentially, and people like to consume fish, and the fish stocks can't naturally keep up to the consumption that we have as a world population. And so there's obviously also concerns amongst more conscious consumers today that they don't want to participate in the depletion of natural stocks of fish. People are eating more fish because of its nutritious food source. Even the Canadian Food Guide recommends eating several helpings of fish per week, and that's really even educated now among our young people in school. And basically overall, we know when it's farmed fish, it's a quality fish source, it's safe, and it's coming from a sustainable stock. And as well, people obviously want to support aquaculture because it's creating jobs and business opportunities in communities, especially in coastal and rural communities. Aquaculture is actually very popular and growing along coastal, rural, and remote areas and communities, and providing local socioeconomic benefits, which means people like to support those farms to support local businesses. So overall for Manitouwadge, we can look at aquaculture as a potential socioeconomic driver. Sustainable aquaculture has the potential to be very impactful, as I mentioned, specifically in smaller rural areas, which Manitouwadge is. And so you'll hear about a lot of First Nation communities across the country who are really investing and willing to work in aquaculture operations, as well as I mentioned earlier, on the East Coast and the West Coast, very small rural communities. This is basically the foundation of their community economies. And so those economic drivers are, of course, direct jobs in the value chain, whether it's in hatching, raising, harvesting, processing, packaging, shipping and delivery, transportation. Those are all direct jobs that are associated with the aquaculture industry. And then there's also the indirect jobs that we have to think about, too, that come with an industry like this. So construction during a facility development, boat repairs with the lake or ocean-based business, environmental services, veterinary services. The fish actually do have to have access to veterinary care. So those are all types of jobs that are indirectly associated. So a couple of statistics you probably saw in the report that I provided to you. So in Canada right now there are about 25,000 full-time jobs in aquaculture. It generates $5.16 billion in economic activity annually, and almost 200,000 tons of fish volume. And again, these numbers are growing incredibly rapidly. When we look at Ontario compared to Canada, we're producing currently about 6,000 tons of fish. Those stats are from 2017. And legislation has actually been changed and improved, let's say, over the last few years as attention in the sector has grown. And now there are more than 40 fish species that are eligible to be raised in Ontario under provincial legislation. So some of these that are commonly heard of are tilapia, 4 species of trout, Arctic char, yellow perch, walleye, but there's a full list in the official report of what those 40 approved species are. And, we're seeing great economic spin-off activity across the province in some of these service and supply areas that are associated with the industry. If you look at the map that was in the package, you'll see most of the aquaculture operations in Ontario are concentrated in southern Ontario, and you have to zoom in quite a lot to see all of the farms. But there's one in northern Ontario right now, only one. And so again, some economic stats here. So in Ontario, the impact is also quite significant, over 550 jobs as of 2017. And there's been a 135% increase in production between 2011 and 2017. So you see how these numbers are growing very quickly, especially over the last 10 years. And 106 million meals have come every year from farmed seafood. So we're feeding a lot of families in Ontario with farmed fish. So for Manitouche, we looked at of the list of 40 that are eligible to be farmed, we looked at 8 potential species of farmed fish. So that was trout, salmon, lake whitefish, yellow perch, bass, walleye, tilapia, and Arctic char. And these were fish that we looked at either because they are commonly found in the area, commonly eaten in the area, as well as have the potential to be farmed in the area at a high level. And this is where we started our research and investigation. So as you will see, after thorough analysis of those 8 species, the top 3 recommended species in order of importance for Manitouche right now are the top one being tilapia. And when we looked at the processing, we recommended that any business opportunity for Manitouche right now should be a grow-out opportunity, which means we had discussions about perhaps Manitouche only doing one kind of portion of the process, whether that be the hatchlings production or transportation or packaging, but we actually are suggesting that to reap the full economic benefits that the investment requires, that a grow-out operation would be the best option for Manitouche. So we recommend number 1 is tilapia, and you'll see in the report there was a matrix that we provided of which species would be preferred for this area based on several factors, whether it's the type of environment that these fish do well in, market demand, and other factors. Rainbow trout was second place, and then third place was lake whitefish. The top 2, tilapia and rainbow trout, really the deciding factor was that they both have similar outputs in terms of how long it takes them to grow and the cost of the facilities, but the demand was very high for both of these types of fish. However, tilapia had higher market demand because it's more rarely produced in Ontario. Most of the current fish farms in Ontario are producing rainbow trout, And so competing with Southern Ontario is not typically something businesses in Manitouwadge we would think would want to take on. However, tilapia, there are very few operations and there is large market demand for that fish. And then Lake Whitefish looks really good, has a great feasibility for Manitouwadge, just doesn't have as high a market demand. It's not a fish that is as commonly sought by restaurants or grocery stores or general consumers. We wanted to put a note in about walleye, and because we thought when we talked to the community that was a fish that people thought would be the most feasible option. And so we wanted to make a note here that walleye didn't appear in the top listings simply because of the nature of this fish in a farmed environment. It actually is a cannibalistic fish, and so doesn't actually farm well in a farmed environment. So you will see some First Nations are currently exploring the opportunity of farming walleye, but it's a very difficult process. What we did come back with, however, in the report that was not in the list of 8 was an opportunity to pursue a non-finfish species to farm for Manitouwadge. And our recommendation in the report is actually that the most feasible option at this part of the process is coming out to be Pacific white shrimp. And so how are we recommending Pacific white shrimp? Well, it's a short cultivation and production period. This shrimp only takes 5 to 6 months to mature to the point that it is ready for sale. The harvesting process typically begins around 120 days. And so you can get several harvests in 1 year out of this species. And in only 120 days, they can actually reach up to 9 inches in length. So these are large, highly sought-after fresh shrimp species. There is a high market demand regionally for shrimp. When we spoke with restaurants in the area, all the way into Thunder Bay, one of the largest challenges for restaurants was getting shrimp. And shrimp is on most menus, and having an access to fresh shrimp was actually something that the businesses were really excited about that potential. Right now, grocery stores and restaurants are typically importing Pacific shrimp in frozen form. It comes from the Pacific Ocean areas, and it's coming in frozen. And there are only 3 shrimp operations like this in the whole of Canada. So this is something that is quite an immature market and hasn't been saturated yet. If you look at the research, there is a shrimp farm in Sudbury that recently opened last year. It's an 18,000 square feet facility. He is constantly sold out, and if you speak with that business, he is so busy supplying Toronto that he can't keep up and is already looking to expand and is not selling north of Sudbury because Toronto and the southern markets are keeping him so busy. He actually got investment from the Northern Ontario Heritage Fund to open his facility, and it's been very successful to date. So when we look at this shrimp as a potential market opportunity, the great thing about it is it doesn't require long distances for exporting to market. So we believe that there is a great market locally in Manitouwadge for shrimp, fresh shrimp, as well as the North Shore communities and First Nations. Secondary market would be the Thunder Bay district. And then a third market would be Northern Ontario and Manitoba. And so these are easily accessible markets for this community, ones where you would be able to actually transport fresh shrimp that could arrive fresh and be eaten and served very fresh. And so who would the target markets be? We're suggesting direct to consumers. We believe that your local residents would likely want to buy fresh shrimp. Farm sales, farmers markets across these areas, as well as to grocery stores and restaurants. Even the Metro chain now has a new policy about sourcing local foods where possible, and you'll see in their aisles now they have large selection of locally produced foods. So there's lots of opportunity for distribution with grocery stores and restaurants. In terms of production systems, I'm not going to get into the technicalities too much, but we did look at, would a water-based system be most feasible or a land-based system? And surprisingly, the outcome of the report, I think when you live in a community like Manitouwadge surrounded by lakes, freshwater lakes, and pristine wilderness, you naturally want to presume that growing fish and farming fish in one of these lakes would be the most obvious option. It's actually not. And when we had discussions with M&R as well as with our environmental experts, basically the suggestion and the recommendations have come back that land-based options would be the best and most feasible for Manitouwadge. The lakes in Manitouwadge are not very deep, and there's lots of factors that go into assessing whether a lake is suitable for fish farming, and we felt that it really wasn't an easy choice for an aquaculture operation at the present time. So we are presenting the option of a land-based tank or runs. You can also have land-based options in ponds. Ponds are the most cheapest, and you'll see in other communities pond systems built in sheds and garages and old barns on farmland. So ponds are the cheapest way of having a land-based option, but we are suggesting we go more sophisticated and look at a tank-based system. Of course, the cons to tank-based systems are that they are higher initial startup costs and operational costs because of the specialized equipment that's required and the environment that they need. Basically, the initial capital costs are heavier than if you were to be looking at a lake-based option. However, with these types of facilities, they are operational year-round. You don't have to worry about seasons, so you can have multiple harvests in any given year. You are then able to farm diverse species of fish, such as shrimp, because you don't have to be worried about what the natural environment is. You can create it, any type of exotic environment that's not locally present in one of these tanks. And they're less likely to cause issues with diseases and cross-contamination because they're isolated environments. And they're typically more friendly for the environment in terms of reuse of water supplies. And aquaponics is something that also can be a side product of a tank-based system, which is the growth of plants as part of that tank. That can also create other opportunities for hydroponic and plant growing and different types of businesses like that. So some spin-off opportunities, and they can be set up anywhere, which is really the great part of it. So when we look at potential opportunities for Manitouwadge in terms of one of these land-based systems, you have lots of vacant industrial, commercial land that could be used if you were looking to do a new build for a facility. But we're also recommending that as a first step, we look at where a retrofit might be possible of an existing vacant commercial space or property. And in the report, there was a few recommendations in there to look at. Again, depending on the size of the operation that an entrepreneur would be looking at, And the final choice of species that they would be looking at would depend on whether one of those existing properties could be used or whether you would have to look at a new build. And then just a few location considerations that we wanted a potential entrepreneur or business to consider. So, of course, making sure that the land space is large enough to house the species that are selected. Having close proximity to major roads is very important, not just for trucking out the product, but also for receiving supplies and feed. We have heard of projects that are being developed in quite remote and rural areas, and access has become challenging for those businesses, so that's certainly something to consider. And having access to electricity, very important, especially for these tanks that need to be plugged in to a good and reliable power source, as well as if we were looking at working within the city, what would be the potential zoning amendments that might be required for a site. But overall, having access to good quality water and sewer systems, these types of facilities are pretty easy to operate and manage, and a lot of them have one person basically supervising them during the evenings, or some of the times they're set up to alarm systems depending on how large they are, but they're pretty self-sufficient once they're set up and operating. So my final summary here of findings was that we believe that there is a potential economic opportunity to develop aquaculture in Manitouwadge as a new industry. So it is feasible. There is community support and market demand to pursue this type of industry. The preferred species at this first phase of study is to look at Pacific white shrimp as a potential species for farming, as well as if finfish are desired to pursue for an entrepreneur. The top three are tilapia, rainbow trout, and lake whitefish based on market demand. In terms of the aquaculture models, we're recommending that the community pursues a land-based system and looks at vacant industrial spaces for potential locations. And then lastly, that the community or the entrepreneur explores regional partnership opportunities. We believe that there are some good potential partners in the region to develop some of the support services that would be required to make this a larger initiative, particularly perhaps with local and regional First Nation communities who have some expertise in this area and some businesses that could lend themselves well to supporting aquaculture in this area. And then my final comments would be, this is a growing sector globally. It's a growing sector in Ontario. It's certainly an opportunity that is evolving quickly, and more entrepreneurs, municipalities, and businesses are looking to invest and get involved in this industry. Aquaculture is the fastest growing agricultural sector right now. And that's why the Ontario government has put support into studying it and looking at where this province could develop opportunities, whether it's in the farming or in the processing itself. And with high food costs in Northern Ontario, the demand for locally sourced food products and the trend, to be honest, around accessing local foods, we think that it could be a great economic driver for a community like Manitouwadge with the right investor. Thank you.
Questions?
Through the chair. What is the nearest aquaculture to us right now?
The nearest aquaculture to you is in closer to the Manitoba border. And it's not directly solely aquaculture. It's a lot of stocking that they're doing with a sideline of farming. But I think the Sudbury operation, to be honest, would be the closest significant operation to look at as a comparative.
Through the Chair, how much area would be required for one of these land-based operations?
Through you, Mr. Chair, it really depends on the final fish species that's chosen. So some of these, and how much the entrepreneur wants to produce. So it's really, at this point, hard to say. There are operations that are producing, one harvest per year, and that's all they require to be profitable and feed their neighbors and community. Whereas there's other businesses who want to export and sell lots of product to businesses and restaurants and grocery stores. So it will be up to the entrepreneur and the business in question to decide what type of commitment they'd like to put into it. I can tell you, though, the 18,000 square foot operation in Sudbury, not all of that space is for the tanks. That houses his packaging and wholesaling and all of the other things that go into his business.
Through the Chair. When you were talking about the different fish species, what do you mean by grow out?
So grow out means to maturity. So grow out means that you harvest and farm the fish until it's ready to sell to market. Some operations, they do only a certain stage of the development, so fingerlings perhaps. They might harvest eggs even at the early stage of a fish farming process. Some communities or businesses may handle the packaging or the potential freezing of a fish product for transportation. So we did look at, was it feasible to only work in one small area of the lifespan?
Okay.
No further questions? And be it further resolved that Council thanks the above noted representatives for attending and providing the update to Council. All in favor? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Moved by Councillor Rolla, seconded by Councillor Hudson. Resolved that the minutes of the regular meeting held on March 27, 2019 are adopted as circulated. All in favor? There are no petitions or correspondence. Moved by Councillor Campanella, seconded by Councillor Rolla. Resolved that correspondence item 08-01 be received and filed. Is there need to move forward, or is that? Okay. All in favor? Moved by Councillor Campanella, seconded by Councillor Moffat. Resolved that the minutes of the meetings of the Manitoba Public Library Board held February 11, 2019 be accepted as received. All in favor? Moved by Councillor Campanella, seconded by Councillor Rolla. Resolved that the minutes of the meeting of the Thunder Bay District Board of Health held February 13, 2019 be accepted as received. All in favor? Moved by Councillor Moffat, seconded by Councillor Campanella. resolved that the minutes of the meeting of the Thunder Bay District Social Service Administration Board meeting held on February 20th, 2019, regular February 20th, 2019 closed, and February 21st, 2019 closed, be accepted as received. All in favor? We recently finished a tour of the Pickering nuclear facility. The heavy security and the detailed attention given to the spent nuclear fuel was just extremely impressive and reassuring. I think everyone who has concerns about the process should make every effort to see the process for themselves. If it's not possible to visit the facility in person, then I would suggest that you make every effort to visit the demonstrations which are periodically brought to Manitowocks. It's a terrific learning tool and a chance to have any questions answered by professionals. Next item is update by CEO Clerk Treasurer.
Through the chair, I have nothing to report at this time.
Moved by Councillor Hudson, seconded by Councillor Scapanello, being a bylaw to adopt a code of conduct for council members, local boards, and committees, be read a first and second time.
Through the chair, the next two items before you are policies that were a little dated, and we've had them revamped and revised. They've been prepared by a legal firm and have been adopted and accepted in many municipalities across the province. So they're presented to you for discussion, and if there's no concerns, then approval.
Any questions concerning the...
Through the chair. My only question on that is, I noticed the date was August 2018. Is there a reason why it was...
Through the chair, that's their template. So at the bottom, that's just their header.
Okay.
Or sorry, their note at the bottom. It's not relevant to anything in the document.
Through the chair, the only question I have is the Municipal Act, Section 223.4, Paragraph 5, information recently received. Why this particular code is more stringent? That's the only question I have.
Through the chair, you're catching me off guard. I don't have an answer for that.
Oh.
Not at this time. I wasn't prepared for the question. Like I said, these policies have been vetted by lawyers. They were prepared by lawyers. So I have no concerns about the validity and the content in them. I know there was a question posed to council by an individual through email. If that's where these questions are from, that individual is not a lawyer. And if that's where the question from, then I really wouldn't give it a whole lot of credence at this point. I have a lot of faith that these documents are accurate and current.
No, I do, through the chair. That is where it came from. And the Municipal Act is very specific.
Correct. And like I said, the individual asking the question is not a lawyer. These were prepared by lawyers.
Okay. Thank you.
Any further questions on it? Okay, and further be read a third time passed and numbered as bylaw number 2019-07. All in favor? Thank you. Moved by Councillor Scapanello, second by Councillor Hudson, being a bylaw to adopt a council staff relations policy to be read a first and second time.
Through the chair, this is a new policy for Manitowoc. We did not have one in the past. It is a requirement of the Municipal Act to have such a policy. We're a little late in presenting this to council. It was supposed to be in place, I believe, by April 1st. So again, it was prepared by the same lawyer and has been accepted and used by many municipalities in the past. So again, it's for your presentation, discussion, and approval if you so wish.
Any questions?
No.
Seeing none, and further be read a third time passed and numbered as bylaw number 2019-08. All in favor? Moved by Councillor Rolla, seconded by Councillor Scapanello. Resolved that regular council meeting dated April 24th, 2019 be cancelled. Discussion.
Through the chair, all of council and myself will be attending NOMA in Thunder Bay. So council has the option of either cancelling the next meeting outright or rescheduling to another day.
Chair, is there anything you see that would be relevant in order that we should have the meeting?
Through the chair, there's one policy that I know that Mr. Cranny wants to bring forward. Could it wait? He said yes, it could. It's not urgent, so that's the only agenda item that I have off the top of my head that is pending right now or waiting for the next meeting. So it's up to council.
Through the chair, if anything urgent or comes up, would we be able to just schedule a meeting as needed?
We could call a special meeting as long as we meet the notice provisions, yes.
Thank you.
Conclusion is that we just cancel the meeting.
You don't, be canceled and just sign it because there is no further action.
Therefore, I'll call the question. All in favor? Moved by Councillor Moffat, seconded by Scapanello. Resolved that council is in receipt of administration report EDO 2019-02 submitted by Florence McLean, Economic Development Officer, regarding the agricultural feasibility study final report, and be it further resolved that upon conclusion of council's review and consideration, direct staff involved, council approves staff to continue working with the regional communities to explore interests and opportunities to create a sustainable agricultural industry with our neighboring municipalities and First Nations communities. Any questions? I think everybody enjoyed the report, and I think they're all pretty excited for it.
Great, thank you very much. And I just want to refer you to our website. We've been keeping tabs of any media queries that we get, and we did an interview with CFNO, CBC, and also the presentation was provided to the Ontario Aquaculture Association, and they provided that to its membership in their latest newsletter. So all of that's on our website, and it is getting quite a bit of uptake from around the province. So that's very exciting for Manitowoc.
Yes.
Call questions. All in favor?
Through the chair. So now, after this first preliminary study is done, what is the next step? Do we have to wait to be approved, or do we move on to the next level, or how does that work?
So the intent of the project was to have to do some background work on the potential for opportunities in Manitowoc around aquaculture, knowing that it's not something the municipality would operate, but that we could use the document to go out and speak with potential investors or entrepreneurs about starting a business in Manitowoc, and that we've done some background work. We've kind of paved the way with the province and the MNRF about what would work in Manitowoc. And then the province is very interested in opportunities in Northern Ontario, and they've made a commitment to us that they will put us in touch with other shrimp farmers in Canada to see if there's opportunities for them to expand into Northern Ontario and specifically Manitowoc. So I'll be following up with them on those opportunities, but even reaching out to the operation in Sudbury to see if there's interest for them to come and have a look at what Manitowoc has to offer. There's funding programs available to have those types of tours, and that it wouldn't be at our own cost. We could get a grant to bring people in to look at Manitowoc. But also looking at the opportunities for infrastructure development for an operation like that, and whether the property was owned by Manitowoc, can we develop the site? Can we put sewer and water there through a grant, and then have an investor come in and build a facility? So it's about exploring and developing relationships and securing partnerships, but it's also about talking to our neighbors in order to make it more sustainable in terms of all the opportunities and how we can be more efficient in saving costs and sharing costs. And I have been out to Pickmobert to meet with them to talk about the opportunity, and they're very interested in working with us and in seeking the information that we've already put together in order to start working together. My understanding is that Marathon and Pick River are working together on a project. So it's about developing those relationships, those potential partnerships, and building a cluster of aquaculture projects within the region.
Thank you.
Those are my next steps.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
And I'll call the question. All in favor? Moved by Councillor Scapanello, seconded by Councillor Moffat. Whereas Section 239(4) of the Municipal Act 2001, SO 2001C25, provides that before holding a meeting or part of a meeting that is to be closed to the public, the municipality or local board or committee of either of them shall state by resolution the fact of holding of the closed meeting and the general nature of the matter to be considered at the closed meeting. Now therefore be it resolved that this meeting is hereby closed to the public, as the subject matter being discussed falls under the following section. Section 239(2)C, a proposed or pending acquisition or disposition of land by the municipality or local board. LUP 1525-1001876 and LUP 1525-1001997. All in favor?
What are you buying, Florence? Is it because of you up there?
Yeah, like
Oh, yeah, you can't relax.
mugs.
Oh, they just, we went to the store down right downtown.
Yeah.
Yeah, they did a tile, super cheap,
That's from the D store, no? Yeah.
Big canoe, getting died buying, there's a canoe in the rafters. In Toronto, there's one of that store downtown, they're taking this back last week. $5,000 canoe.
Oh, because they're closing the store?
No, he bought it.
You bought it?
Yes. Your friend will take it up for him.
Okay.
Crazy.
In Toronto. Yeah.
Big lined up. But I think looking at Ottawa, I'm on my way to Concord now, I went to the one in Toronto last week. I just got this one.
Oh, yeah. I don't know where all of the area that I shop.
Once you get to that section, it's like, oh,
This is not the best.
Moved by Councillor Moffat, second by Councillor Scampanello. Resolved that the meeting is hereby declared to be open to the public at 8:25. All in favor? Carried. Moved by Councillor Hudson, second by Councillor Moffat. Resolved that Council direct staff to proceed with the purchase of LUP 1525-1001876 and LUP 1525-1001997. All in favor? Moved by Councillor Moffat, seconded by Councillor Hudson. Resolved that the regular meeting adjourn at the hour of 8:28. All in favor? We're done.